Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. FPL Vincenzo here, and today we're going to talk through my Gameweek 5 wildcard. Obviously did a pod earlier this week talking about my reasons for activating the chip, and I think I'm still happy with that decision. I think it's still looking quite good for me that I made that move already. I think I've worked out that I've gained 0.6 million, for example, in team value, and as a result of that, the wildcard team I'm going to share at the end of this video wouldn't have been affordable on if I'd have activated the wild card now. So the fact I activated on Saturday night, there's obviously been quite a lot of price change from players I initially owned and those I've wanted, has meant that I'm 0.6 change there in value, and now I can afford a slightly different team. So I'm happy with that decision. So we'll get straight into sort of what I'm thinking around this in this wild card, because when I activated the chip, I didn't have a plan in terms of which player I wanted. And it's actually taken me a while to get this video out this week, not because I've not had time, but again, because I've been unsure on a couple of things. So I've done a little wild card spotlight to start with here, trying to remind myself of what I'm trying to achieve from this wild card. And that's going to help me then pick certain players, avoid certain players, and have a better longer term plan. So I like to ask myself certain questions first to remind me of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So first point is safe picks versus punty picks. And I think this is arguably the most critical thing here. We know the power of DEFCON now. I think it's fairly evident, particularly amongst defenders, that those defenders reliable for DEFCON have not a higher ceiling, but are more reliable over a season than the high upside defenders who may or may not get enough attacking returns. And I think naturally now, particularly as safe sort of every week defenders, the DEFCON guys are better. You know, from the likes of James Tarkowski, they're starting on 4 points every week. And then you might get extra. You may lose a bit for a yellow card, etc., etc. But they're quite safe. Particularly in his case, I think he's a good example of this, and probably the best example. That if we assume now that he's going to play all 38 league games for Everton, there's no reason why he shouldn't, unless he gets injured or the odd suspension from too many yellow cards, etc. But he's likely to play 38 games. I think that what's likely in terms of DEFCON is probably very close to 38. But for argument's sake, for this discussion, we'll say he's going to get 30 games of DEFCON. So that's 30 games. He's going to get 4 points, 120 points. The other 8 games, he's going to get 2 points for appearance, another 16, so 136 points. Everton are going to keep maybe 10 clean sheets. That'll be another 40 points. He might get some attacking returns in amongst that. He might get some BPS amongst that. He might get points taken away for yellow cards. He might get points taken away for Everton conceding too many goals. But I think it's fairly reliable at this point that he's going to get 150 points. And there's not many players, I don't think, that have that as a really reliable floor. I think his floor to ceiling is quite low. I think he's probably going to get somewhere between 150 and 180. Where other defenders at his price point could maybe go past 200, depending on how many attacking returns they get, how many clean sheets they get. But the floor, if they underachieve, is a lot lower. And I think to do well in FPL this year, to probably, I think playing this way guarantees you pretty much a top 100k finish. I think it could even guarantee you as much as a top 50k finish. If you pick 5, maybe even 6 of these, what I'll call safe picks. So I think Lacroix is one from Crystal Palace. I think Tarkowski's one. I think Caicedo is probably one in midfield for Chelsea. Elliot Anderson has been unlucky with DEFCON, but I think he's likely to stay in this bracket. There'll be others. But you know, for an outlay of somewhere between 5 and 6 million, you're guaranteeing yourself somewhere between 150 and 160 points per player. If you own 5 or 6 of them, you're putting yourself on sort of 750 points from 5 or 6 positions in your squad. That's a very healthy return. Many players won't get that level of return from those price points by picking higher upside, riskier picks. So I think the way the game's going now and the developments we've had in the game, I think this season now, to get a good finish, I think you go half and half between safe picks and punty picks. And I say, I think you'll be then pushing top 50k. If you've got that as a base, you can still do better because you've got 5 or 6 punty spots in your team. Now, come out on the right side of those, that's a big gain. Like last year, for example, I picked Nicholas Jackson instead of Chris Wood over a critical part of the season. I think Chris Wood outscored Jackson by about 50 points. Pretty much a 50-50 decision, I thought at the time. If there's 50-50 decisions like that this year and you get them all right, and you have the one that gets the 50-point gain over the other, maybe there's a couple of weeks where there's not a clear captain and you pick the better option. Maybe there's a week where there's a high EO captain, but you just have an expectation that someone else is better and you win in that decision. You could be looking at top 20, top 10k. And I think we have a decision based on the second point here of playing your way. If your goal and your aspiration this year is to finish top 50k, I genuinely think that's the way to play the game now. Load yourself up with a big collection of safe picks, reliable minutes, reliable DEFCON, players that have that more likely capability of getting 150 points, and you'll be well on your way. For me, even though I know, or I don't know, but even though I feel like that's the way to play, it's not the way I really want to play. I wouldn't call myself a maverick manager. Within reason, I stick to templates and bandwagons and things, but I'm always a bit prone to doing something a bit different. And I'm certainly a manager that wants to win FPL, not finish top 50k. I don't really care if I finish 50k or 200k, 300k. I'm playing for the best rank I can get. I'm still playing to win until that's genuinely not an option anymore. So I'm asking myself here, how do I sort of merge the two together? I know how I feel like I should be playing to get the best result. Where can I tweak that to give myself the better chance of the even higher finishes? Do I have 1 or 2 less safe picks? So maybe I just have 3 safe picks and then have 8 punty picks. Do I just accept that I'm going to go differential on my captain each week? What's my appetite for risk versus reward? And I think we all have to ask ourselves that question. I'm more a risk-taking manager, I would say. I played 5 at the back on my free hit last week. That was generally perceived to be not a sensible strategy, not how you attack a free hit. I got 89 points doing that, and I think probably outscored a lot of free hit teams. Took a risk. It paid off in this example. And I think now I'm in that mindset again that I don't completely want to go with what I think the model is for safe versus punty. I want to be a bit different, maybe one or 2 sort of extra punty picks. James Linden on Planet FPL regularly says, play it your way. And I say that that's the way I'm happy to play. I'm aware and accept that safe picks are now a bigger thing in the game. DEFCON is a bigger thing in the game that needs respecting and needs acting upon. But how far in that direction do I want to play? I don't feel like I want to play basically a game of 5-a-side every week in FPL where I have 5 or 6 players that they're safe picks. You just pick them every week and you get what you get. And basically all your transfers and decisions are around the other 5 players in your team. So to me, that feels like I'm playing 5-a-side FPL. Doesn't really sit right with me. So I'm more likely to go 3 safe and 8 punty rather than 6 and 5 or something. So work that out. So what you're trying to achieve, for me, I want to win the game. I'm not looking to win a mini league. I'm not looking for another 10k finish on my record. I got 3k last year. I'm not looking at top 100k even. Some people play for milestones like that. They've got a rank history to protect. They've got a run of successive 50k finishes to protect. They've got a mini league they want to win. And that's fine. Work out what you're trying to achieve. But for me, I'm trying to win the game. Next question I'm asking myself here is sort of longer term. And do I want to pick a team that maximizes now? But then in a couple of weeks, I need to book in almost 2 or 3 extra transfers because, as an example, Arsenal, they have Man City this week at home, Newcastle next week away. Then I want them. In theory, I could pick a wild card now with no Arsenal players in it and get them all in when the fixtures actually swing. in game week 7, game week 8. At that point, we have full disclosure on who's available for Arsenal. We have more awareness of when the likes of Havertz or Saka might be back. New injuries might have occurred by then. Logically, you'd get the players in at the week you actually want them, not in advance of that. But I don't think I really want to book in loads of transfers. I'd like to save more transfers for the fixture shift in game week 13 and be able to act more on that, which might mean I can't use as many around game week 7, game week 8. Therefore, I need to be a bit more conservative now with my draft that has game week 7, game week 8 in mind, that I don't ideally want this player from now, but I'm going to want them soon, rather than someone else for 1 or 2 weeks who's maybe got better fixtures, higher upside, but he's going to need a transfer to deal with. I'll maybe accept a slight reduction in points now to save the transfer. That's I'm trying to limit how many booked in transfers I have. I think there will be 1 or 2, but for now I want to limit it. And the last thing on Wildcard I say is working backwards. I've got in my head the draft I want in game week 13. My initial plan before the season started was to wildcard game week 12 with the intention of then setting up for game week 13 a week early, thinking I would get the team I wanted a bit cheaper. That's still, for me, the critical part of the year. And for those that can get to that point with a wildcard, I'd still advise that's the best strategy to really maximize that period. I know, what my wildcard draft would be if I had a wildcard in game week 13. Therefore, I still intend to get to that team. I just can't do it with the wildcard. It's going to have to be a combination of picking players now, making transfers between now and then. So I've used that as my basically start point, what I want in game week 13, and then tried to work backwards on how I'm going to achieve it. It's not a foolproof strategy. It may not end up going exactly to plan, but it's always good to have a plan. And so I've got a working plan now for the next 8 weeks, how I get to my team in game week 13, which players I'm likely to need to sell, where I make money to allow upgrades, etc., etc. So for your wildcards, if you're planning it this week, next week, even in game week 8, pick a moment where you want a certain team in the future. And then I think it's quite a good idea to work backwards. So on to my wildcard draft. So it's taken me all week to come up with this. There's been quite a lot to consider. Quite a few positions here where I've been very 50-50, not completely set on what I want. So I'll read it out first for those on audio. So the 2 goalkeepers are Raya and Dubravka. In defence, I've got Christian Romero, Lacroix from Palace, Joachim Anderson, Senesi, and Mukiele from Sunderland. In midfield, there's Brian Mbeumo, Cole Palmer, Antoine Semenyo, Reinders, and Dewsbury Hall. And then up front, we've got Gyökeres, João Pedro, and Haaland. So a few little bullet points I made at the side here around thoughts, and I'll talk about a couple of these decisions now in a little bit more detail. So normal sort of a loose FPL rule for me is to only spend 4.5 million on a goalkeeper. I never think the more expensive goalkeepers justify their price, and I think usually there's a cheaper one that matches overall points totals. So in terms of points per million, value for money, however you want to word it, normally the 4.5 keepers are better. I started the season with Petrovic in goal, and I was still happy that he's probably the best 4.5 million keeper. So no big urge to sell him. I was quite happy to keep him. Then I looked at what else I wanted. So I was looking at Arsenal. I think right now they're the best defence in the league. I think last year they were the best defence in the league. Very soon they come into good fixtures. I knew I wanted at least one defensive asset from Arsenal. I was weighing up whether I wanted 2. Of all those defensive assets, we've got 2 fullbacks doing very well, but potentially minutes risks. There's competition for places and no DEFCON, importantly for them. The 2 centre-backs, more reliable for DEFCON. I'm not saying the best in the league for it, but more reliable for it. Probably slightly more nailed. But again, a little bit of competition for places. Mosquera's done well covering Saliba lately. Insippi's there to rival Gabriel. But I think Gabriel probably still is the best Arsenal defender to own. So I put a draft in with Petrovic and Gabriel, and I was spending roughly 10.5 million on those 2 players. I then flipped it and thought, well, hang on. The same 2 teams, I can have Raya and Senesi, and this is costing 10 million or 5. I think it's a 0.5 difference, however it's worded. I think Gabriel went up 0.1, so did Senesi. So 0.5 difference between them. Raya's the most nailed of all the Arsenal defenders. So if I want Arsenal defensive coverage every week, he's going to get the most minutes, you would think. And Petrovic isn't like Flecken last year in terms of loads of save points to go with clean sheets. He will get some. And I think he's the best 4.5, but it's not like he has a way higher ceiling than Raya. Where Senesi's got DEFCON in every game so far, where Gabriel hasn't. So for covering the same two teams, I'm not losing much in the way of save points, but I'm gaining quite a lot in the way of DEFCON, and I'm saving 0.5 million. I think Raya and Senesi's arguably a better pairing than Petrovic and Gabriel. So I reached that conclusion quite quickly. Then I had a draft I was happy with, but I was 0.3 short of affording it. And I had a couple of decisions, really, how I was going to make that affordable. So Raya down to Pope was considered. Newcastle's defence is still the best in the league in terms of expected goals conceded. And actually, still, they're underperforming what the data is saying, despite doing very well defensively. So Newcastle defensive coverage remains a good option, I think, for anyone right now. So Raya to Pope was an option. At the time, I had James Tarkowski in my team. I've spoken about him on the previous slide about how having safe picks is a good thing. But there was options cheaper than him, including Christian Romero. So that was an option. I had Brian Mbeumo, who I really wanted. I'll talk about in a second, but I could move him down to Cody Gakpo. Or there was Joel Pedro, who I was happy to move down to someone like Voltemade from Newcastle or something like that. So I had multiple ways to save some budget, which would then make the team affordable. I've ended up settling for now that I'd rather do Tarkowski versus Romero. So I spoke a bit about Tarkowski, and so I do think he's very good, very reliable for 150, 160 points. But for me, he was just a bit too boring. I know it's just some people just view FPL as just get the most points as possible, and points are fun. But there's an element to me that I still don't really rate Everton as much as they're improved. I still think he's a bit of a dull pick. As much as he might keep ticking over with 4 points here and there, he just wasn't exciting enough for me. And for the way I like to play the game and my expectations from the game, did I really want him? I didn't. I was looking. The reason I played my wildcard in the first place and activated on Saturday night was I was just looking at a lot of players that had good fixtures and positive sort of attributes about them. But I was just looking at them and thinking, I don't want you. I don't really like you in my team right now. Every time I look at you in my draft, I'm kind of rolling my eyes and shrugging my shoulders that I don't want them. Tarkowski gives me vibes a bit like that he's there. He's probably a good pick, but I just kept looking at him and thinking, I don't really want you. So then I looked at Christian Romero and doing very well so far. And it made me consider Tottenham a little bit more. So if you go back to last year, I think there was labels put onto Arsenal that they were a strong defensive team. They had good attacking players. They had good attacking shape, structure. But whether it was because they didn't have a great centre forward, whether it was because the players were a bit robotic in their positioning, whatever it was, they just didn't score enough goals. And there was an over-reliance almost. This is where the label comes in. A reliance on set pieces for goals. And obviously it was a bit of a running joke through most of the first half of the year how many goals Gabriel and Saliba got. Because they became a bit of a set piece team. Lots of clean sheets, lots of defensive solidarity. 1-0 to the Arsenal defender gets the goal. I'm not sure it's quite like that with Tottenham this year, but I can see similarities. I've not been overly impressed with Tottenham's attacking shape. They're obviously playing two wide players now who I think are more creative than goal scorers. They're playing Pape Sarr and Bergvall and players like this as sort of attacking central players. They're not big goal threats either. So the attacking shape, I think, is not as optimal as it could be. Not as optimal as other teams like Chelsea, Arsenal, Man City, who do a better job at getting people into certain positions. And I don't think their team's full of lots of goal scorers, Tottenham. What we do know with Thomas Frank is from his time at Brentford, he knows how to set a team up defensively. Tottenham this year have already kept out Man City and done a defensive number on them. And he is a bit of a sort of proactive manager in that way, Frank, that he's almost defence first. And we've seen from Tottenham, all the way through from the Super Cup into the league game, that they're going to be a threat from set pieces. So last year I had triple Arsenal defence for a block of the season. I had Raya, Gabriel and Saliba. I'm not going to do that for Tottenham. But if I genuinely believe that they are this year's version of Arsenal, who have a nice blend of defensive solidarity, higher probabilities of clean sheets, centre-backs who can score from set pieces. And I think in Romero's case as well, this was borne out last week that Tottenham beat West Ham 3-0. Van de Ven scored, but it was still Romero who got 3 bonus points. There's clearly a reliance on him to be heavily involved in build-up. I don't know all of the ins and outs of how BPS works in terms of what contributes towards it, but clearly he does things that do contribute towards it. We've got a defender here then in Romero who is in a defensively solid team, is in a team that I think is more targeting set pieces as a source of goals than others. He's got a high probability, I think, of BPS, particularly if Tottenham clean sheet. And he's not completely alien to DEFCON. He's only got it in 1 game so far. He got exactly 10 contributions. I don't put him down as a higher DEFCON defender. He's probably in the same bracket as the Arsenal guys who can get it from time to time. He's not the Tarkovskis, the Senessis that are going to get it, but there's a chance he might get it now and again. That just feels a bit more fun to me. It's risky because if Tottenham go through a little spurt of 4 or 5 games where they keep drawing 1-1 or winning 2-1, losing 1-0, he's going to be a 2-point merchant, I think, quite often because he'll need the clean sheets, I think, to get the BPS. He's not massively heavy on the DEFCON. And let's be fair, Tottenham are still, should we say, a top 6, top 8 team. So they're not going to keep 20 clean sheets. So if Tottenham do go on a run of conceding in 4 or 5 straight games, Romero's probably getting 2 points in those games. So the floor isn't what Tarkovsky's is. But to me, he's just a bit more of an exciting pick. To me, I feel like I've observed something with Tottenham. I'd quite like to put myself in a position to maximise that. Romero's already started the season very well. I've not been on that bandwagon for the first 4 weeks, but I'm in a position to jump on it now. And it's probably a bandwagon not many have picked up on yet. So more fun for me to play this way. And he's a sort of player that could go on a little streak of 8-9 pointers. If Tottenham can keep keeping clean sheets, he keeps getting good BPS. Maybe he'll get the odd attacking return in this sequence. So I'm happy and satisfied to own him. I think the other defenders kind of pick themselves. They're all a bit DEFCON, a bit safe. Lacroix, Anderson, Senesi. And then Mukiele is just there as, of all the 4 millions, I think he's DEFCON ceiling is probably the highest as well. And I think I was looking slightly at bench boost weeks, and I think he's kind of not too bad in 2 or 3 options I've got for that. So that's obviously something to think about. When you bench boost, you need the whole squad. He might be useful there. Into midfield, and as I say, there's 2 players here that sort of discussion. I think Semenyo, we don't need to talk about. I think Dewsbury Hall, we don't need to talk about as the best 5 million. And I think Reinders is basically a 7 million midfielder operating as a 5.7 million midfielder. His role and his expectation is not that dissimilar to someone like Enzo Fernandez, who's been priced at 7 million. If Reinders keeps getting 90 minutes often, keeps playing either an 8 or a 10 role often, and keeps being allowed to make runs from deep into the final third often, he's going to get points. He's clearly underpriced based on the minutes he's getting, the role he's got in the team. At the moment, he's getting a lot of 2-pointers. And again, you could play safer here with someone like Caicedo, who's about 0.1 less, who's going to get DEFCON a lot more frequently, get a point for a clean sheet, all these sorts of things. Reinders is one of those that could get 100 points, could get 200 points, depending on just how many attacking returns he gets. Caicedo, I don't think gets 200, but he's way more likely to get 150, 160. If you want to play the safe game, I think Caicedo is good in this spot. If you want to chase the upside, I think Reinders has potential for sort of 15, 20 attacking contributions. Probably similar, capable of matching what Morgan Rogers did for Villa last year. So I'm going to roll the dice and own him, but with an awareness that I maybe don't play him every week. Maybe there will be weeks where the extra DEFCON defender, like in Gameweek 5 here, is better. Reinders away to Arsenal. I don't have high expectations. I'll play the other DEFCON defender. So I'm not stuck on playing him every week, but I just think at his price point, he's too good to turn down, not to own. So let's get on to Mbeumo and Palmer. So we'll start with Mbeumo. Not seen him in many drafts, to be honest. I think his ownership's fairly good. But it might be because there's a lot of casuals that play FPL and a lot of casuals that support Man United. And he was a bit of a shiny new toy at the start of the new season. High expectations could have been put in to a lot of those teams. But amongst those that are a bit more committed, a bit more in tune with sort of current FPL, he's not in many drafts. His underlying data is very good. Possibly, I think, actually top for midfielders XGI so far, or at least XG. And also top for shots. Data-wise, he's very similar to Semenyo. And we've seen how many returns and how many points Semenyo's got. If you throw in that Mbeumo's already played Arsenal and already played Man City, it's probably maybe even more impressive where he stands in terms of data. I thought it went at the start of the year that he would be the Man United player most tasked with making runs in behind, trying to attack the penalty box, getting into good positions. And arguably right now he's underachieving. Clearly Man United as a team have got issues. Clearly the way they build the ball up through phases of play has problems. Creating chances maybe isn't the best. And maybe there's an element that they're quite hard to trust right now because they're underachieving. But I say his underlying data from a personal level is very good. Man United obviously don't have any European games. They're out the League Cup. So you think he's going to be nailed here. So he's got pretty reasonable fixtures for the next block. He's absolutely locked in terms of being nailed. He's got great underlying data. And in terms of ownership of the managers I would expect to be competing against, he's not very well owned. So to me, he seems the definition of a valid punt right now. I can see why people wouldn't want him and have reservations about Man United. But for me, there's 3 or 4 players. Well, there's not a big collection of players, I think, that you feel like would score a hat-trick over the course of a season, are capable of, in any given game week, of getting 2 or 3 attacking returns. That pool of midfielders is quite low. It's those that play as wide forwards in a 4-3-3, maybe as a number 10, maybe those that take pens. But there's not loads of players you genuinely have sort of expectations that it might be a 20-pointer coming around the corner. I think Mbeumo is one that does give you that, as does Gakpo, which is why I think I was considering him as an alternative. But I just feel like Mbeumo's a lot safer for minutes. I think Mbeumo's fixtures are maybe a little bit better, a little bit longer. So I'd rather have him. And he's just a bit more of a differential. Cole Palmer is probably a bigger headache because I don't want to overreact here to 45 minutes of notable performance against Brentford, where he had like 5 shots, obviously scored, had quite a big involvement, followed that up against Bayern Munich in midweek with another notable performance. It's a bit early to say that he's back, and this is Cole Palmer from last year, but there are some evidence that things are picking up a bit from the Palmer we've had for basically the last 6 months. I don't know how well he's going to do, is the ultimate question here. But we know, I think, that he's one of those players that it won't take long for a bandwagon to form. If he gets 1-2 attacking returns against Man United, in the next game week, he's going to get a price increase. He may even get a double price increase. He has that power and that influence on managers that almost they can't resist getting him in. As soon as they think that he's back, that his minutes are a bit more secure, everyone's going to go out of their way, take hits, maybe even pull out wildcards to get him in. I just don't want to be taking that risk. There's not a massive collection of midfielders I want right now. Obviously, the likes of Saka's injured, Bruno Fernandes not doing much. Salah's too expensive. So I can afford to have him. I don't really know where I stand with him in terms of expectation, but he's one of those I'd rather have with me than against me right now. So I'm going to put him in. If in 2 or 3 weeks it looks like this was like a mini increase in performance and sort of the last 6 months of Palmer's coming back and we're unsure about his minutes again, I'll move him on. I've only got 2 Arsenal players in this draft. He could become a third Arsenal. Who knows if there'll be another option in midfield who I feel like I want at that point. For now, I think he's worth risking for the next couple of weeks. I say if he goes off and does really well, then he's a headache if you don't own him. So I'll have him now. And at the moment, actually, looking at this team, there wasn't an obvious captaincy for this week. I don't think there's many obvious captains anyway. Naturally, people default to Salah, and I can understand why. I say I've got no interest in having him right now. So who's the next best captain? There isn't a clear standout here. And actually, in a week, I think this set of fixtures is quite hard to predict outcomes this week because on paper, those that are good, the Forest against Burnley, the Villa against Sunderland, there's other caveats that make the predictions a lot harder. So I think I'm tempted to roll the dice on Palmer here. We know he's got a ceiling of 20 points. We know Man United aren't necessarily the best defensively. City exploited them last week. If Palmer is sort of back to form, going to have 5 shots a game and things like that, then obviously there's chances of returns here. So he's my captain at the moment. It's a bit risky, but in a week where I think it's quite open who you captain, I'm happy to do it. Last point I'll make, and sort of follows on from the spotlight section, was around planning for the future, not booking in transfers. So I've got Gyökeres here. I'm not overly keen to have for the next 2 weeks. I don't have high expectations against City or Newcastle, but I know I want him from game week 7, game week 8. I'll just get him now and save the transfer, because the alternative would be someone like Watkins, who has better fixtures now, but is in a worse team and in worse form. So is Watkins going to outscore Gyökeres enough in the next block to warrant the transfer? I decided he wouldn't, so I'll pick Gyökeres now. The one player that I want to plan for here is Isak. He's already had a price rise, believe it or not, yesterday, despite only starting 1 Champions League game for Liverpool. That's already caused some people to see enough that they want him. Fair enough. I think it's a bit too soon. Don't think he'll start against Everton this week, for example, but I can see why people might want to get him in now. There's a good chance by game week 13 I'll want him. Liverpool's fixtures get good, then we'll have enough evidence by then of how Liverpool are playing with him, how he's working alongside Salah, things like that. So I've got, obviously, Gyökeres, who I could sell for him. I've also got João Pedro, who I would quite happily sell for him. With the likes of Palmer in the team, he should be gettable in 2 moves here, Isak. I can do Gyökeres to Isak, only needs to find 1.5 million or something. That's easy from a collection of players. Even in Mbeumo could come down to an Ismail Assar or an Ndiaye or someone like that to achieve it. If I want to keep Gyökeres for longer, João Pedro, I say I can use Palmer to downgrade to achieve that. Loosely, I think at the moment, my game week 13 strike force would be Haaland, Isak and Voltemada. So again, that should be easily achievable. Pedro and Gyökeres to Voltemada, and Isak doesn't need a lot. I might have to make one other transfer to achieve it, but that would mean 3 transfers in game week 13. This team here, if nothing major happens in terms of injuries or anything like that, I shouldn't really need to make a transfer for a couple of weeks. And I think that's always a good plan after Wildcard, that you should be able to roll for a while. That was going to be the plan if I got to game week 8 and Wildcarded then. I was going to roll into game week 12, game week 13, then make 4 or 5 moves. Now I've just got to follow the same plan, but from a slightly earlier point, game week 5 in this case. But I'm happy to do it. I don't see a reason why any of these players would need an urgent sale here. I think they'll all be good for minutes. I think they'll all be fairly reliable for returns. And say if I need to, I've got transfers rolling through. I've got 0.3 in the bank, I think, with this team as well, if that ends up being useful. So, yeah, I've got a plan around Isak. I'll just have to time it well, because another one, a bit like Palmer, that if in the next 1 or 2 game weeks he hits the ground running for Liverpool, maybe comes off the bench and scores against Everton, maybe then scores again in game week 6, he's a player that could very quickly rise sort of 0.5 in price. So I think everyone knows that he has a very high ceiling at Liverpool. It's just there's a lack of trust right now in his minutes and how he works in the system. But if that improves quite quickly, I think we'll need to be in a position to act quite quickly to get him in, or be prepared to pay considerably more for him by waiting a bit longer, which might suit some people, probably won't suit me. So that's it. Yeah, that's the wild card I'm likely to go with. I hope that justifies things a little bit. I say no regrets in activating the chip. A little bit of thought there around Tottenham, which I think could be quite noteworthy moving forward. And I'll be back, obviously, before the game week 6 deadline with another pod next week. Don't know what I'm going to talk about yet. We'll see what comes out of this week and what talking points we have. But yeah, good luck with the game week, everyone. And I will speak to you all soon. Cheers.